Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to witness an all-star panel discussion from industry as they're going to discuss about making of your application containers ready. This webinar is jointly done by Red Hat and Prodevans. We hope you all are doing good. Kindly bear with us if we face any technical difficulties, as most of us are operating out of the home network and those are under severe strain. Given the situation we all are going through, however, we have taken all the necessary precautions to make sure your experience is smooth and flawless today. Today's webinar topic is making of your application containers ready. I would urge all the participants to post your questions in a Q&A box, which will be answered by our host at the end of this session. Please note, time permit, we will answer as many as questions and rest will be addressed after the session via email on one-on-one basis. This session is moderated by Mr. Gaurav Sharma, Solution Architect, Red Hat. I would request Mr. Gaurav to take over.
Hey, thank you so much, Thanu. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining in for another Ask an Expert session. So, I just let me quickly share my screen. Hey, Thanu, can you just give me the access to share my screen? Okay, let me share this screen. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so as I was saying, and Tanu also introduced the same, that talking about container ready. I guess in today's world, container is something that every individual is hearing all about. And what we at Red Hat has always believed that every organization, irrespective of the geography or the industry vertical, we know that they want to do more innovation without having the failure, or I would say they want to bring the idea to life very efficiently and very soon. Moreover, want to create more customer value and differentiate with the open source technology and an open culture. Today, digital transformation cannot only happen just adopting the digital technologies. You need to take a lot of things under consideration, talking about the digital technology, the people mindset, the culture innovation, bringing the platform agnostic applications, and every single thing. We at Red Hat believed over 27 years that individual cannot achieve the way and at the speed they want to achieve, and thus we heavily depends and we always believed in the collaboration, and one of those collaboration approach comes out of the partners. And when you see the one of the partner which I just want to highlight as of now, and thanks Intel for sponsoring this particular event, talking about the OpenShift and the Intel support. Now, the Red Hat OpenShift container platform is powered by Intel Xenon Scalable processors. And if you see that Intel processors, the Xenon processors helps us to deliver the latest open source softwares and the hardware technology, and helps us to drive the digital transformation with the support of RHEL operating system, which is efficiently certified to provide you optimized performance, advanced security features, the uptime for your servers, and helps you to reduce the service disruptions. And definitely the objective of adopting the containers is to bring down the portability to your application, and simply in a word I should say the scalability. Moreover, when I say collaboration, definitely it helps you to innovate more, give your our applications the performance edge to the things, and moreover, together we can achieve more. By pairing with Intel Xenon scalable platform with the latest operating system, or I should say RHEL technologies, we helps you to enhance the capabilities around the Red Hat OpenShift container platform. And I believe while I'll hand it over to our partners, Prodevans, they will be helping you to guide that how the choices, as we are the leaders in the open source technology and the cloud, adopting containers can give you the flexibility in which you can deliver the products, and helps your customer to enable the agility in the cloud and as well as on your on-prem applications as well. Moreover, like the major objective of the OpenShift container platform, providing you the reference architecture via partners, is to help you innovate more, to give you the supporting hand that yes, we are there to help you in every single way. We certified, we include the predefined end-to-end hardware and software deployments. We give you the complete checklist that how horizontally we can scale, and without even worrying of the day one and day two operations that we are always scared of. Yes, we help you to drive the innovation with the competitive advantages over all the things. Now, I don't want to take much of your time. I'll be there throughout your session. Now, I just want to hand it over to our partner Prodevans, who has joined us, and they will be talking about the entire journey, that how you can be adopting the container with the ease and how they can help you in designing all the solution. Prodevans is our business strategic partner. Moreover, they are one of our best partners available, having the Red Hat consultant wide range, and today they are going to talk about their expertise in how and also sharing the experience that how they are able to adopt the containers and bring the competitive advantage to their customer. So Deepak, I welcome you all from the Red Hat, and thank you so much for doing this session for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Gaurav. It's pleasure, and I'm sure it's going to be a you know quite exciting and interactive session. I'm sure we will be interacting more openly, bringing, as you said, okay, bringing more
Mhm,
choice to
mhm.
our audience. Adopting container journey, right?
Right.
So, am I allowed to present?
Yes, I guess now you can.
Okay. Okay, so I have few slides to, um, well, I'll just take you through. Um, Here you go. Let me know
Yeah.
if you can see my screen,
Yes, we can.
right? Okay. So, quick introduction about Prodevans. Thanks, Gaurav, for introducing us as a Red Hat partner. But um, we are not just a partner. Actually, the DNA is Red Hat here. It's been a journey which I have lived through for 18, 19 years, and um, I'm very proud of that particular journey. Um, and We are basically a technology company, um, doing primarily app modernization and several different Red Hat solutions. Um, we are partner with Red Hat for more than a decade, in professional service training and channel services for last 4 to 5 years. The expertise we bring to the table is primarily on open source technology, and I have been in my personal career, it's almost 2 decade. Okay, I have been working on infrastructure, data center, and application transformation. So along with me and my leadership, what we bring is that hands-on, track record, deploying, managing, services safe and secure for our, several customers. And in this journey, it is evident that no single solution fits onto the organization, right? Okay, means you cannot bring a product or a tool to fast track your digital transformation. So you have to understand it well. You need to bring that enterprise experience to the table in front of your customer, and design and solutionize it in such a way that okay, it solves the business problem. In the digital era, everybody is looking for a faster outcome and improve the experience of their end customer, and that is where these bespoke solutions are built by the partners. So we take the Red Hat product and solutionize it in such a way that it solves the business problem of the customer. And for that, you need qualified professionals, and that's one of the core strength in Prodevans, where we have 50 odd Red Hat certified engineers, architects, developers, who actually deal with these kind of technical problem. And across pan India, as well as the solution architect today I'll be introducing, he's in Singapore, Prodevans. And when we deliver solution to our global customers, we cannot restrict ourselves into a particular technology or domain. And especially when we are onto the application modernization, which is the theme of today's session or the webinar, we will be talking what ingredients, how it works, what challenges we face, and that comes through our technical expertise. uh, from the capability standpoint, we are also known as an integration partner for several OEMs, and Red Hat is one of our premium primary OEM services which we offer to our customers in terms of cloud automation, in terms of optimization, in terms of container adoption, and so on and so forth. So we have our container adoption framework in place, which is definitely driven from a lot of different organizations uh, experience which we have dealt with in last several years. And in that particular program, which I will be talking mostly today, is to understand how this particular thing is being done. Okay. So I'll just pause here. If there are any questions, please stop me through, and I'll be happy answering them, um, and we can have a pretty interesting discussion, right? No way we are going to just run past you through these slides, and you get bored. So let's quickly jump into the agenda. So what are we, why are we here, right? So the the time which is allocated to us is to take you through that container adoption journey, right, from walking, in the forest, making the trench, and run and fly, right? So my job will be, along with my team, to take you through that journey, and how in the race of delivery transformation, business change, application development, how the leaders in these organizations look up to the modern tools, technology, process, and uh, everywhere it is not greenfield, so that you will start from the scratch. Okay, there are brownfield evolution in digital era, and that is where the organizations or the enterprise organizations most of you represent or work, um, right, must have some legacy monolithic applications. And greenfield development, you may also represent, I can understand that, okay, half of the development could be greenfield, a new solution. So use of container and container orchestration tools. So I'm representing Red Hat here. So we will be talking about uses of container and container adoption tools, which help the developers to build, release the code faster, quicker, provide strong avenue for the organizations to build a winning digital customer experience, which I'm very passionate about, right? Okay, solving the business problem of the customer, not just a technology problem. And historically, and this is my experience in last 4.5 year, I have been on container adoption journey. I have been driving organizations in my previous role, and in the current role as a consulting CEO. um, Historically, things are being limited to do proof of concept. Okay, and especially in India, we start with that proof of concept, and we fail to scale, right? I will be talking about that. Okay, why organizations start early, proof of concept, and pilot using, involving their low-hanging applications or applications which are easy to containerize. But if you look at the enterprise, if you look at the world, okay, which you are supporting, right? It is all on the building blocks of agile and DevOps. And unless the developers adopt themselves, right, for your in-flight project as well as for your new feature development, this change cannot happen. And that's the transformation OpenShift help you to get, right? Then what are the nitty-gritties to create containerized services? Okay, we will also talk about that. So I have got Sitikant Sarangi, who is my app dev solution architect, and he has been working with me on several customer stories we have. So we will be discussing what are the ingredients to make the containerized services. Okay, so there are 12 factors which we will be deep diving. Then application assessment means when you have a landscape of applications. So I have represented organizations. You'll be surprised. In each organization might have thousands of applications. So and if you take one application with about 100 services, then you can think of how many microservices we are talking about. So doing a perfect assessment and discovery is one of the best practice in container adoption. So we will talk about that as well. And when you are containerizing the application, and like I said, okay, walk through a proof of concept, create a trench, make that trench wider, then start running. Then what means once your UAT is done for that particular application, you have to ensure that okay, it is sustained, stable, and you need an enterprise product like OpenShift running your application production ready. So we will talk about path to production. So I summarize again the agenda today. We will talk about how that adoption journey is, then what the philosophy Prodevans drive with its customers with the help of Red Hat and Red Hat technology or the tools. Then we will introduce the container platform and container orchestration, and we will also tell you the ingredients of containerized service, how the service is being built. Ask sufficient question. All developer and operation related questions, please do ask. This is an opportunity which you are getting to interact with people who have lived with it. Okay, we have delivered things which a lot of OEM has said it is impossible. So please ask as many questions related to containerizing services. And how will you do the application assessment for a large landscape, a faster discovery, and how you will do path to production. So that's the agenda which I'm setting here. So let's start with container, adoption journey, right? Uh, it's very interesting. So you have this QR code. You begin your discovery session. So if you want me, Sitikant, or any of my team member, along with Red Hat, to help you doing a discovery, right? Is one of the first step. Then please do this, do scan this QR code and um, give your expression of interest. Okay, we will create bandwidth, we will reach to your company and make sure that we prioritize ourselves for a discovery session for you, right, along with Red Hat, right? So discovery session is the first thing, right? Because companies who are transforming, right, they do not know where to start. And if you do not know where to start, the first thing is to build the confidence, and building the confidence happens only when you have identified the application which can be the success story for container adoption. and that is where the discovery actually help, right? So if I have to address the elephant in the room for you, um, we can help your organization with our structured agile program, which can streamline your path to digital leadership, right? And our container adoption program is packaged with all the best practices. So what you see is those 6 best practices which Red Hat has laid for you. And we are equipped to abridge the employee skill gap. So that means, okay, if you do not know how to start, we will help you to start, right? So you need somebody to hold your hand and make you walk before you fly, because what you hear in YouTube and all social media, all top leadership digital transformation is all flying, right? But how will you crawl, walk, run, right? Because you need a partner who can help you. So in this phase, the pilot phase, where we discover your portfolio, and we come up with a viable workload. Viable workload, it is absolutely essential to size the application, because when you look at an applications, if you don't know how to qualify and size the application, you cannot estimate means you cannot put a price cost to the transformation. If you cannot cost to the transformation, you cannot talk about return on investment post it is transformed. So identifying the application or workload and identifying the team for upskilling, because uh, you cannot boil the whole ocean in an organization talking about container adoption if that organization have been traditionally doing well, and things are monolithic, so they may not accept it. Okay, so the repeatable practice for application onboarding is create the small team, and or identify the small team where things can quickly start. And as you bring multiple applications, you move to the next phase. Next phase is what? Accelerate and optimize. Okay, where your preparation to make sure that, okay, how containers can be built and scale, right? Building containers, you have a lot of recipes available, but scaling container, without understanding the decoupling of dependencies in an application is one of the key dependencies, so which we will talk about. That I will leave it to Situ, who is an expert, so he can definitely bring more light to it. Um, then optimize. So accelerate, you scale the application, you scale the development scenarios, you scale the environment. But optimize it, optimize cannot happen bringing all new tools, right? This is another myth people have. If I need to start container adoption, I will have to bring everything to my organization and start container adoption, which is again a myth, right? So we as a consultant, what we do is we look at the tools landscape, we look at the application landscape, we identify the application which is doable with a small team, and once it is being done, then we prepare for larger team through the shift left journey, which I will be talking about how training helps. Then uh, you know talk to the leadership and build the confidence that, hey, it is working for you, with or along with Red Hat OpenShift. But make sure that when you optimize, you are utilizing the existing tools is your secret management, single sign on, databases, monitoring, so all those things need to be integrated properly, and those need not be in container form. So that is one of the key thing in the container adoption journey, that you optimize to an extent where you are using the tools which is already there for you. Then for self-sustain, you cannot depend on a vendor, right? So we can come help an organization, or you can start with a small team and small team is becoming successful. But if rest of your developers have not adopted to it, the mid management is not adopting to it, okay, it cannot be a self sustained phase. And self sustenance is first is culture. So people talk about DevOps, right? And I treat DevOps as purely a culture game, right? Okay, it is not of 20 different tools you learn and how to do it and it is DevOps. No, if your teams still do not talk, do not give feedback, do not trust each other, okay, things cannot move. So culture, technology, that is the change premature into the organization, and that leads to the leadership board, if how they see the change, right? So for us this sixth step is absolutely in a sprint based model. So I would say that, um, believe in us, right? That thin layer team, Red Hat and Prodevans can be your onboarding team, right? We will help you to walk, right? And to get started your container adoption, you can, I have given you the QR code. I'll also leave the contact, and I have Kinil and Gaurav, okay, who can help you to do that, right? Um, and once it is on it catching up the speed, we will prepare you from the beginning, and we can also show you how your investments is actually getting you the ROI, and we will also let you to migrate in large scale, right? So with this, I will introduce my co-presenter, Sitikant Sarangi. So on a lighter note, okay, he's a big critic of my leadership style because I jump into things and start taking up, and Situ is the one, okay, who gets deeper domain wise before he take up the job. Uh, have been knowing Siti, for more than a decade. I have seen him from a Linux engineer to a senior solution architect, working for us primarily on global projects. Very, very transformational project, a very complex project, okay, for customers where things are absolutely business driven, and it touches the economy, which he solves. With no more introduction, Situ, over to you if you can hear me, and talk about container. How do you see OpenShift helping in your journey before we get into the assessment best practices?
Yeah, hi. Hi. Thanks, Deepak. Hi, everyone. Am I audible and visible, I
Yes,
guess?
yes,
Okay.
you are.
Yes.
Okay, great. So, as Deepak said, that we have been doing a lot of transformation of applications globally, and we know how to transform these applications, how to bring in container scope into the applications, and how we can benefit the business out of it. So that's what we have been doing since couple of years, and I'm here to give you some insights to it and how we can actually help you in adopting containers and adopting OpenShifts into your native environment, where you can see the benefits and where you can enjoy the benefits of the OpenShifts container offering. So Deepak, can you move on to the next slide, please? So when we are starting with containers and we are discussing everything about, so you must be wondering, I don't know, means whether you are familiar with this term container or not. So let me just give you a brief explanation of containers and how OpenShift is catering to the container adoption program. So containers are basically the code, the libraries, the dependencies packaged together and running in an isolated environment. So that is what we can call it a container, right? So when we discuss about applications, right, so traditionally how the applications are deployed, You can say that you have a VM or a server where you have some application server where you have deployed your Java runtime, then your application code by building it, by compiling it and making it an application binary. Then you are deploying it on an application server. Then you are for the scaling, you are deploying it in multiple nodes. You are clustering these nodes, these application server nodes. Then you are bringing in a front-end load balancer where it will load balance the ingress traffic to multiple applications. So that is how a traditional deployment looks like, right? But when we talk about containers, the idea is to create an isolated environment where all your application dependencies, libraries, and whatever your application needs, the runtime, everything will be packaged, is isolated there, your application code as well, and it is running in that isolated environment. So the benefits of it, your application is totally isolated. It doesn't depend upon external factors. If any problem happens, if any malicious attack happens, so everything stays inside that isolated environment, and it gets protected. Your other processes or applications running in the same platform gets protected, right? So that is the idea behind containers, and it is very lightweight, it is very much scalable. How it is scalable, I am going to explain it to you. And it is very much portable also. So it is very easy to just port one of your application containers to another environment or another operating system as well in some cases. Okay, so that is what we call containers. And Deepak, can you move on to the next slide? Yeah. And when we talk about containers, how to build the containers, right? So there are two terms I would say that you should be remembering, or you should be keeping it in your mind throughout this workshop. So one is your container based application or container images, and another is your container runtime, right? So Docker is a platform which gives you the ability to package or to ship your applications as a container, right? So suppose your application code is stored in a repository or in your local file system as well, and you are looking forward to make it as a container. So where to start, right? So Docker gives you that kind of ability that it will you can use the Docker engine to create the application container out of your code. Suppose you have a Java code, or you have a Node.js code, or you have a uh, Python code, right? So that Python code, you have to first build it, you have to first compile it and build it to a binary application binary. Then you are deploying it on a application server, right? That is how we are doing it. But how to do it in a container way? So you take the code, you take all the dependencies, all the libraries that are required for the application to run, you package them using the Docker technology. So Docker gives you that ability, and you can create a Docker image out of it, or that is called a container image. So one is your application binary, the runtimes, the Java runtimes, then your dependencies, the OS dependencies, the libraries, everything that you need to run the application. You package them all together in using Docker, and you ship it as a Docker image or a container image. You can place that Docker image somewhere in the registry, and you can pull it wherever you want to deploy it, right? So that is what Docker does for you. Deepak, can you move on to the next slide? So I will just finish up the Docker and containerization part, then we will try to interact with you. What is your understanding, and if there is any questions, right? So this slide explain what is the difference between virtualization and containerization. I hope you guys are already familiar with virtualization, right? Virtualization is the abstraction layer at the physical level, right? The physical hardware level. So you have a set of hardware, a big hardware, suppose a 128 GB RAM and 32 CPU server, and you want to abstract it, and you want to create multiple virtual machines on top of it. So you have to install a hypervisor on top of it, and then you can create multiple virtual machines, and on each of the virtual machines you can deploy many applications, right? So for that you need a sizing requirement, or you need to do a capacity planning for that. Likewise, containers are the abstraction or the isolation at the app layer, right? You have a virtual machine or a physical server or any host OS. So it can be on a physical server, it can be on a virtual machine, it can be on your laptop as well, right? You are installing a container image on a container engine on top of it, and in that container engine you are deploying your application containers which are isolated from each other, right? So that is the difference between the hypervisor and container engine. So one side you are using your physical server to create many virtual machines using the hypervisor, and the other side, after these virtual machines are created, you are installing a container engine and you are deploying multiple containerized applications on top of it, and which are isolated, right? Is there any questions till now? This is a very basic understanding. I just want you to be clear on this.
Shritikant, all good as of now. We'll try to take some of the questions towards the end.
Okay, okay, great.
Yeah, done. Thank you.
Deepak, can you move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so this one is also explaining how you are actually assigning resources to the container and to the virtual machines. So suppose your application is running on a virtual machine on a application server, right? So before that, you need to do a capacity planning on how much users, how many users are going to use this, and what will be the traffic, ingress traffic that will be coming in, and accordingly you are doing the sizing, right? Probably it will need 16 GB of RAM at the peak hours, and at the surge hours how many GB of RAM is required. So those things you are doing a prior planning, and you are assigning this many resources to the virtual machine, right? Then you are deploying your application on top of it. But in case of containers, you don't need to do that. You just need to know how much minimum RAM or resources your application need to run, right? So if you are using something like OpenShift is a smart orchestration platform, container orchestration platform. So OpenShift will help you scale the application in a way that you don't need to do a prior planning or prior sizing planning, and you can go with a smart utilization of resources. You just need to know how much minimum resources your application need, and you assign that much resources to one of the containers. And OpenShift has the ability to scale it up when the ingress traffic is more or during the peak hours, right? So that is a basic difference. In the left side, with in the case of virtual machines, you are assigning a constant or a static resource pool to the RAM, to the virtual machine or to the application. But in case of containers, there is no need of that, and it is easily scalable. And the utilization of resources is very much smarter than the virtual machine case. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. So this slide depicts how a typical Docker environment works. So suppose you are a developer, you have your application code stored in your repo or in your local machine. Then in order to containerize that application code, you need to write a Docker file. So Docker file are basically instructions to the Docker engine when it is actually when we are packaging the code as an application. So these are just instructions. So from where you are going to pull the base image, what are the changes that you need to do at the configuration set, and what are the changes that you need to do when you are deploying the application or you are creating the application container image. So that instruction is written in the Docker file, and you are using that Docker file to create the application container. So for to create an application container, first thing you need is the base Docker image. Suppose you have a Java application, right? So for the Java application to run, you need some kind of application server, right? Suppose JBoss is there, or any other Wildfly server is there, or Node application server is there, or Apache application server. So what you can do is you can pull one of the base images that is available in the public container registries. OpenShift has also one, and you can package your code with that application server image, and you can create a custom image out of it, and you can store it in the container registry. So container registries are basically your storage and distribution, the way of storage and distributing the container images, the container named images. So when you are creating your application images, then you are actually giving a name to it, a tag to it, right? So container registries are the storage of these images, and whenever required, you can take it from the container registry itself. So it is a way of storing and distributing named container images, right? So after the image is ready, you are storing it in the container registry, and the platform, the targeted deployed platform, you can deploy it from the by pulling it from the container registry. So that is the whole idea how Docker is working, right? And we can go on to the next slide. So this is a typical example. This is a little bit technical, that what are the commands that we use to create a container image out of your application code. So using Docker. So Docker, so first one is Docker pull nginx. So this is a classic example of a nginx server being a customized nginx image that is being built in Docker. So we are pulling the nginx image from the Docker Hub's public repository, and then we are doing some kind of customizations to it using the Docker file. Then we are building it. So these instructions you are seeing: Docker pull nginx, Docker run. So these are the Docker commands, and after you are able to pull the image, you will be able to run it in your local environment as well if you have a Docker engine installed in your local environment, right? So, and these applications, suppose your nginx or your application that is been containerized, will be running as a container runtime, and it will, you can consider it as a container, and you can isolate that with the from the other processes that are running on the same operating system. So that is the basic idea behind Docker, and how we can issue these commands to create the Docker images or the container images out of your application code. Yeah, we can move on to the next one. So this is a classic Docker architecture. So what are the components that are responsible for a Docker daemon to run, and how we can connect to the Docker daemon? So the commands that you saw in the previous slide, the Docker pull, Docker build, and Docker run. So these commands actually connect to the Docker daemon, which is installed, which will probably be installed on your local system or in a server through a REST API. So that REST API is open after you, or is exposed after you install the Docker daemon in your environment. Then using that REST API, you can issue these commands: Docker build, Docker run, Docker images. So all these commands that will connect to the Docker daemon over this REST API and perform some tasks that you are instructing to do. So I'll just give you an example of how you can containerize a Java application. So suppose um, you have a classic Java application, and you need a specific library to be there when you are running this Java application, right? So what you can do is, first you have your Java application code available in the repository. Then you need to decide which application server you are going to use to deploy this Java code, right? So suppose we can say that Red Hat's JBoss application server you can use for that, and you are pulling the JBoss image first from the repository that is available in your network, or from the Red Hat's public repository, and you are putting your code, you are deploying your code, or you are baking your code into the JBoss application server. Then you are packaging it as a container image, right? So for that to happen, you need to issue some commands. So first command is obviously the pull command, that is your Docker pull JBoss image. So when you issue this Docker pull command, your Docker CLI client in your local environment will connect to the Docker daemon using the REST API. Then it will perform this task. So that is the architecture of the Docker engine. So once you install the Docker engine, or Docker daemon will be installed, and then the Docker CLI client will be also installed. And using the CLI client, you can issue all these commands, and it will connect to the Docker daemon using the REST API, which will show you the image status and the running container status as well. Okay, we can move on to the next one. Okay, so when we talk about containers, so the obvious thing is where or what is the platform that you are going to use to deploy the applications, right? The containerized applications. So OpenShift is Red Hat's offering as a smart uh, containerized platform or a PaaS. So you can use OpenShift to deploy your application, and it is smarter in its own way. It offers you very much extensive capabilities that you are not going to have in the traditional deployment strategy. Like, there is a self-healing feature, there is auto-scaling feature, and there is smart logging feature that OpenShift offers you. So with that, it also offers automation, and it also offers self-service of the entire platform. So as a developer, you don't need to know your underlying deployment techniques or underlying application server techniques, because once you have created your application images, you can use automation or CI/CD to deploy the application on OpenShift, right? So OpenShift does everything else. So OpenShift will orchestrate the application status. It will monitor the application performance. It will log the events in its native logging platform. So that is called ELK, right? Or nowadays it is EFK. And you can see everything from a centralized dashboard: the status, the logs, the application containers, everything that is running from a centralized dashboard. So as a developer, half of your worry about how the operation guy or the operation or the deployment of the application will happen will be eliminated, and OpenShift gives that kind of support and that kind of flexibility when you are thinking of deploying your containerized application, right? So we can move on to the next one, which describes or gives you an idea of OpenShift architecture. So OpenShift, when we say OpenShift has uh, basically two parts that you can consider as a developer. So one is your master node and another is your worker node. So worker nodes are the nodes where your actual load is deployed. Load means your applications are deployed. So whether you have a Java application, whether you have a Python application, whether you have a C application, or a Bash scripting also. So those things, once containerized, it will be deployed on the nodes, right? Those are called worker nodes. And the master node is there to orchestrate the events that are happening on the worker nodes, or at the routing layer, or at the service layer. So basically, master node is actually an orchestrator for all the nodes or for all the services that are part of OpenShift. And it contains multiple things. So suppose I can give you two, three, four examples, because we have a limited time period for this session. But I can give you a high level explanation how OpenShift will help you automating your application deployment process. So one of the key features of OpenShift is your scheduler. So your OpenShift scheduler actually decides where your application goes. So you can see these 6 nodes, right? These worker nodes in the small boxes, the red boxes, which are notified by rail. So these are the worker nodes where your actual application will be deployed. And you can say, or you can instruct OpenShift where to deploy one of the applications. Suppose one of your application is fairly huge. Suppose it requires more RAM, and it requires some extra libraries and some extra functionality, right? Then you can say to OpenShift that my application should be deployed on node 3, not on node 2 or node 1, because they have some other constraints, or they have some other applications, or there is a resource crunch in these nodes, right? So OpenShift scheduler will read your instructions, and it can also automatically read the characteristics of each worker node, and it can decide where the application will go and where the application will best fit. So that is how you can say that it is a self-healing architecture. Suppose one of the nodes is down for some reason, for some resource issue, or for at the hardware level there is some kind of RAM problem or a CPU problem. So OpenShift can detect that, and next time you do the deployment, it will not deploy the application on that faulty node. It will deploy the application in a healthy node, right? So that is how it is best suited for a self-healing digital transformation. And it supports auto scaling of your applications. It also supports auto scaling of your nodes. Suppose there are you have 6 worker nodes in the cluster, OpenShift cluster, and you need more resources to be added, more nodes to be added whenever is required, right? So in that case also you can provision, or you can configure OpenShift in a way so that it can add extra nodes to the cluster, or it can horizontally scale at the node level, right? Similar way, if your application is deployed on the OpenShift and your ingress traffic is more during the peak hours, OpenShift will, if you have enabled auto scaling, then OpenShift will auto scale the instance of the applications. On top of it, it will map these application URLs with the inbuilt HA proxy or the load balancer, and it will avail more instances of the application at the peak hours, during the peak hours. So your application will be load balanced and it will not be slower to the end user, right? So these are the functionality that OpenShift provides, and it is a very smart platform, and it gives you a user interface and everything, right? So when we talk about creating a containerized or a microservice based services on OpenShift, right? So you can say that there is no language barrier. You don't have to assume that only Java applications can run on OpenShift. There is nothing like that. You can run Python applications, you can run C, you can run scripting as well, the scripts, your bash scripts on OpenShift as well, right? So it is a self-service provisioning platform. It has automated build and deploy techniques. You can use CI/CD to deploy your application, right? The configuration for each applications are managed separately, so that your applications will not be dependent upon one environment. Suppose you have a multiple dev, prod, and UAT environment, right? So you don't have to write configurations into the application as per the environment. You can externalize that, and you can have the baked image of the application where the configurations are externalized, and for each of the environment you can inject these configurations to the applications, right? And your logs and metrics and the monitoring parameters will be displayed in a centralized portal for all the applications deployed on OpenShift, and you can visualize what is going on with your applications from that dashboard, right? So this is how you can create the containerized services on OpenShift. And we can move on to the next slide.
Great. So Situ, means I must thank you again for enriching most of us with respect to um, the container structure, how we containerize an application, how to build an application, and how OpenShift um, you know um, help in self-service, automate, help many developers to work and need not worry about the um, you know uh, behind the scene stuff. uh, so can we also discuss when we walk into an organization, right? When we walk into an organization, what exactly happens? Um, means with the organization not knowing where to start, like what I was mentioning. So what exactly happens when we walk into an organization during our assessment discovery phase? So would you like to throw some light on that, Situ, so that all our viewers uh, know that um, it's always not true that the organizations have a greenfield new feature development. I have interacted with the CXOs and CIOs of financial service, telco, and different domain, where the ability to deliver change of their application, and why certain slowness in their transformation journey, which is actually holding them back because of not knowing what to pick from their entire landscape. And how, as a consultant, how you decide what best practices you follow, picking the right candidate app and making that transformation change as a success, and prove to the leader that yes, you are on the right journey.
Yeah, sure. So let me give you a context, little bit of context, how this entire containerization thing started, right? So before going to an application assessment part, when we discuss about containers, right? When it started, so the initial idea was the applications need to be stateless to be eligible for containerization. So that was the initial idea or the thought process, and many years spent on that kind of discussion or that kind of debate whether the application needs to be stateless, right? So why it needs to be stateless and why people were debating on that? Because if you have a containerized application where it is isolated from all the other running processes in the same environment, then your platform should be able to cater to the requirement that it will be self-healed, right? And it will be auto-scaled. So self-healing and auto-scaling are the two key features of OpenShift platform or any other containerization platform that are coming into the picture, and how these applications will be self-healed. So when we talk about self-healing of application, so many times, or we can say 80% of the times, it is dependent upon the environment, right? So your application, think about a traditional way, your application running on a JBoss server on rail platform, and there is means it's a huge application and many other applications are also deployed, and you don't exactly know how much RAM it is consuming at a certain period of time. And certainly there is another application deployed, and during the peak hour the entire platform crashed, right? Because of less amount of RAM or the resource crunch issues. At that time, what will you do, or what will your production support team will do? It will try to clear up some of the unnecessary application, the cache, the run times, and they need to restart these applications, right? Or eventually, or that there is any problem with the runtime, then they need to restart the server sometimes, right? This is what as a troubleshooting 80% of the time production support team does, right? So if you are considering a container orchestration platform, smart container orchestration platform such as OpenShift will do this kind of task for you. So it will detect when the application is going to crash, or it is already crashed because of some kind of resource issues, some kind of library unavailability issue, or any other external integration issues. Suppose your application is integrated with database and it is storing some database, and suddenly that database is down for some reason, is not accessible, then your application goes into a crash state, right? OpenShift will detect it, and OpenShift will try to self-heal the application automatically, right? So that is one part. One is self-healing. Second is auto-scaling. So you, during the off hours, during the off-peak hours, you need to run your application at the smallest capacity, right? And during the peak hours, it should be higher. So your OpenShift platform or the container platform should be able to auto scale your applications during the peak hours. So these are the two key factors, and the basic need of this two key factors to be catering to your application is your application needs to be stateless. So think about it. If your application is stateful, heavily stateful, suppose your application is reading some files from the local file system and it is showing some report in the UI, then it is storing some data to the database. So that kind of application, and it is a transactional application also, it is many people are using it for doing their day-to-day transactions. So in that case, if you want to self heal the application or auto scale the application, obviously you need to think about the external integrations, the local file system where your application is reading the files or it is storing the files too, right? So if these things are not addressed, then your applications cannot be self healed or auto scaled, right? So in order to support this kind of architecture, we were actually debating that whether the application should be stateless or should be stateful, and that is still a debate that is going on, that whether we should make the application stateful or stateless, or we should keep it semi stateless, right? So in that context, all this application assessment is coming in. So before onboarding your application or migrating your application to OpenShift or any other container platform, you should be first assessing that application, first seeing what are the deployment steps, what are the libraries that the application needs, what are the runtime that application needs, and is the application is stateful, is it the configurations are hard coded into the application. So all these things needs to be assessed first and documented first, right? So when we talk about that, so these are the 10 factors that are coming in, right? So before transforming your application to a container application, you need to first consider these 10 factors. First one obviously is your application server. So if your applications are hard coded in a way that it is supposed to use only one application server, which we have seen with some of the monolithic applications or legacy applications in banking domain, where they have actually hard coded it in their application code, that application will be only supported in some of the application server like JBoss or any other application server, and it cannot be ported to any other application server easily. So that is a bad architecture and bad way or approach of packaging your application, and that dependency need to be removed, and the version dependencies also. And sometimes the configuration, suppose you have your application needs some database passwords or database urls to connect to, and it is different for different environments. Suppose for your UAT it is different, and for your production it is different. So sometimes what developers do is they hard code that values to the code, or they put it in the ini file, and they package the application or they compile the application, and they have to redo it for the production as well. So for UAT you are putting a ini file for our properties file in the application, and for production you are putting a different file, and you have to compile it two times, right? So that is the problem when we are talking about platform independent or environment independent application container, right? So that also you need to consider, and these things will be considered, will be assessed during the application assessment phase. Likewise, I said you need to carefully go through the dependencies, whether the application is using some kind of file system to store some files, or is it reading some files from the file system. And if your application is reading some kernel based libraries or kernel based code, and it is using that, suppose your application is using your USB or any other hardware, right? So those things need to be removed from the system libraries, and you need to port it to the Java libraries, right? Obviously whether the application is written in a old version of your Java or Python, or whether it can be migrated to the new version, because all these OpenShift platform that we are talking about, these are we are talking about a digital transformation, and obviously we need to see that whether your application or monolithic application can be transformed into the newer versions of Java, which provides you better security and compliance methods, right? So and then obviously how your applications are logging the events, whether it is hard coded, whether it is stored in the file system, how we can change that, how we can bring that into the OpenShift capabilities, and OpenShift will take care of that. That also, sorry, need to be catered, right? And portability, port bindings, and stateless, these are the three factors that you need to consider if your application has some hard coded port that is written into it, or if it is actually using some kind of native APIs to connect to, because that is not a good practice when we are talking about self-healing or auto-scaling architecture, right? And statelessness I have already discussed, and I am going to explain it more. So these are the 10 factors that you need to consider, you need to assess during the application assessment phase, and you need to discover whether your application code has all these dependencies, and how we can re-engineer that, or how we can change that, how we can change it to cater it to OpenShift, so that OpenShift will support the application in a way that it will be self-healed, and it will be auto-scaled, it will be digitally transformed in the business domain, right?
So to summarize, what you're saying is you started with two factor, then you moved to, multiple factor, and I do hear that, okay, the assessment goes all the way up to 12 factor, now I'm hearing that, okay, 16 factor as well. So,
Exactly.
so what is the goal? Means, is your goal to, bucketize the applications which are uh, most ready, for containerization, which needs some level of refactoring, and which needs a great level of developers involvement to, recode it, or enterprise architect, involvement to re-architect it. So would you like to tell, in a landscape, because I have worked with you where, a multi-billion dollar bank, with um, hundreds of developers, 300 plus application, I have seen the gamut of assessment you have done. So how that post assessment landscape look, and how do you convince the leader, to start with which application, for your container adoption journey?
Yeah. So when we talk about this application assessment part, right? So obviously, how you are going to assess some application if you don't know anything about it? Obviously, by interacting with the developers or the application team or the application architect, and going through the documentation, going through the code itself, running it through a automated analysis tool such as Red Hat Application Migration Toolkit, which offers you the capability that if you run the application binary with RHAMT, and it will give you the report whether the applications are how much they are ready to be ported into the cloud native platform, or to OpenShift, or to a containerized platform, right? So that is very easy. It generates the report within 5 minutes of the analysis, and it can tell you very extensively that where exactly the problems are, and these 10 factors are coming into, right? So that way, when we usually start with the big organizations, we identify some of the applications, then we use this RHAMT and other tools to run these applications, and to generate or analyze these reports, that how much the application is ready to be migrated to OpenShift, then how much change is required at the code level, at the configuration level, or at the engineering level, or re-architecting the application, or whether it is totally possible or not, or whether we can do it in a other way, right? So those kind of assessment we do to each of the application, because it is very important in the banking domain or in the telecom domain. It is very important to know that how the application can be migrated or can be re-engineered, what are the risks that will be coming in. We have to do a risk assessment as well. So once the application is transformed and running on OpenShift, what are the transactions failure that may come, what are the dependencies or the connectivity to the application, the issues that will come. So those things we need to do. So first one is application assessment, second is risk assessment after the transformation, and then the re-architecting phase. So These three things we do during our application assessment. We identify the low hanging fruits or the applications that are critical to the business. So according to that, we identify the application. Then we start the re-architecture or the re-engineering part, where we connect with the leadership, and we we convey this message that how much changes are required for this application to be a cloud native application, and how we can do that, what is the plan, what is the project plan, all these things coming after that. Then we our developers and our implementation engineer, automation engineers, they put their hands on, and they start working on this. So this is how we segregate the applications when we are talking about the native assessment report. And we can go on to the next slide. There is probably an artifact we can see. Okay.
No, there were a lot of confidentiality in that, so I excluded it.
Okay,
But
no
but
issues.
but I do hear you and agree that the due diligence which we talked about, and using RHAMT, which is a great application assessment product, and it is open source and it is free, and your team has been using, and does that the only tool? Because that does only Java, this thing, right? So you must be having your own expertise of looking at the application which RHAMT do not support.
Yeah, so RHMT actually, or the tools. So there is a Eclipse plugin as well. There are other tools as well. So these tools give you an overview of what needs to be changed, or where exactly the problem will be, and then we have to deep dive into the application, because sometimes it is not entirely possible to go with the tool's recommendation. So the tool will tell you. Let me give you an example. The tool will tell you to remove all the dependencies, file system dependencies, right? Suppose the business requirement of your application is it is reading some reports from the local file system, or it is generating some reports, and it is storing them in the file system. The tool will tell you that remove these file system dependency, then your application will become cloud native or container ready, right? So we cannot do that exactly, because this is a business functionality we are talking about. Your application's target is it will read some reports from the file system, right? So we cannot just delete that part of code and make the application container ready, because that will not make sense. So what is the remediation, how to do that? So how to keep the functionality, and then how to containerize the application. So this is the re-architecting phase we are talking about. We have to satisfy the business logic, the business requirements, and the business functionality. Then we have to containerize the application. So those are the complexities involved. Then another part is coming in, how to secure these applications, right? So once it is containerized, whether it will be connected to the database securely, or whether it will be connecting to the SSO or the SSL in a secure way. So those things also need to be carefully planned and carefully architected when we are baking the application into the containers.
Cool. So due diligence we talked about, 12 factor, 10 factor we talked about, and your discussions has been always with the customer team, right? Okay, related to the container adoption. Um, so how many interviews usually you do, and especially in a composite complex, global organizations which has offices, different region. So how that interview process works, I want my viewers to know, how that interaction work. How do you speak their language, so that they open up and they start uh, talking about things, okay, which usually we do not get to hear, from the development teams.
Okay, so when we talk about the interviews or assessing the application, so the most important thing is the application documentation, and which is a big problem with most of the organization, because for monolithic application, that part is not there. So most of the developers probably they are also not aware that what each part of the code is doing. So we do a application assessment using the tools, then we do the code deep dive, then we connect with the application developers, application architect, and application owner to understand the application coding to understand the business functionality, why this part is needed, why some other code is written there, why the integration is needed. So all these things are coming into picture when we are talking about the assessment. So in order to do that, obviously we have to explain to the developers, to the application owner, that what we are doing here, right? So they will ask you, or probably they will be curious to know that what we are trying to do, why we are transforming their application, right? So we have to explain them the container terms, the OpenShift terms, the stateless things. So all these things we need to explain. So basically we kind of do a 2 hour 3 hour session with them in order to explain that why the OpenShift adoption, the container adoption is needed, why they need to transform their application, and why it will cater to their business requirement and their business leadership, right? So this part is with the application team, the team which is responsible for the application. Then again we have to convey the same messages to the leadership as well. So this is how we conduct the interviews. First we explain them the container part, the OpenShift part. Then we explain how their applications could be transformed and how what are the changes that are needed, and the same messages that we also try to convey to the leadership. Then we sit with the developers and we try to understand their functionality, their application functionality, and which can be removed in order to make the application little bit lightweight. So those are the things we do when we are doing application assessment. So it is extensively consist of interviewing the application team or the developers.
Okay, so the next topic is, once the applications are being identified that it is container ready, or can be refactored to become container ready, or in your term, okay, semi-stateless versus stateless. How it runs on OpenShift? I think you already have touched upon this topic, but I still want to hear in that cloud native scenario, and I have been hearing this buzz for many years, right? Cloud native application, and the exact definition and qualifying that application, running healthy, scaling it and justifying OpenShift kind of investment, which actually bring 300 400% ROI. So can you throw some light on this cloud native approach?
Yeah. So when we talk about the transformation of application and running it on OpenShift or the digital transformation, so what exactly your application will look like after it is transformed and after it is running on OpenShift, right? So first thing obviously is making your application free of all the configuration. So one example I have already given: suppose your application is connecting to some database, and this database, the properties like the URL, the port number, the credentials, the passwords, right? So all these things are probably hard coded into the properties file, and it is packaged in the application's web-inf or meta-inf directory, or somewhere, right? So you have to take that property file and you have to decouple that, or you have to just extract that properties file, and you have to build your application without it, right? And your application needs to read it from the OpenShift's config map, or OpenShift's injection. So OpenShift has a technique called config map. So it will inject the parameters or the values to the application container, and which will be available as environment variables to the container itself, right? So first thing is that, because without that we are actually keeping a dependency which is your environment dependency. So suppose you have dev, uat, and prod, you are actually keeping one of the dependencies in the application code itself. So your application container, when you are making it or when you are building the application container, there should not be any kind of properties or environment specific properties hard coded into it, right? So because your OpenShift platform is taking care of that, Oh, and obviously, I have explained that your application needs to be stateless in order to cater to the requirement that it will be self-healed and auto-scaled, right? And if you are doing the application transformation, then the very obvious part is your DevOps pipeline. So without that, you are not actually enjoying the full benefits of OpenShift platform that it provides to you, right? So it there is a way, or it provides the complete automation. So from your developer's local laptop, he can push the application code to the repository, and from there you can build up the pipeline so that your application code will be automatically compiled, it will be automatically built, the container image will be automatically built, and it will be stored in the registry, from where your OpenShift can pull the application from that registry and it can deploy it on the OpenShift automatically, right? So this is an automated process, and if you not using the DevOps pipeline, then you are not actually enjoying the full benefits, right? So when you talk about stateless approach, there are three things that you can probably consider. First one is remove all the session objects and session dependency from your application, be it a front end application, be it a business logic layer, back end application, only where only your Java back end code is running. So you have to remove all the kind of session dependencies. Then you have to see whether the application is using any kind of file system, and if it is using, obviously you cannot just remove that. You have to use special techniques, that there is a NAS based PV. You can use it, you can mount it to the application container, and you can store your files in the PV, right? Likewise, there is another technique called casing. If suppose your application is a front end application, then you can use cookies or casing technology to store temporary data in the memory, and it will be replicated to all the other application containers that are available, right? So this is how you can make your application stateless. This is a very high level approach, but there are other things that you need to take care when you are actually transforming your application. So the next part is when we are talking about your application containerization. The very basic thing your OpenShift platform provides, or the container provides, is smart adding of feature and easy security patching or easy feature patching of your application, right? So suppose you are running your application with some version of one library. Suppose one of the libraries you are using, that is in your version 1 or beta version, and the next stable release happens. At that time, you need to rebuild your application, sorry. In that case, you can easily patch it, and you can do the deployment on OpenShift, and you can see whether that version is stable on OpenShift or not. If it is not, then you can quickly roll back to the previous version. So that is how the layering approach, when it comes to the layering approach, when you are building the application image, container image, so it gets built in a layering approach, right? So first is your base image, then your next set of instruction, the libraries, then the code, all these things. Then if you want to put additional features into it, then you can just pull the application image or the base image, and it will build in a layering approach, so you don't have to repeat that building process, and it is very quick, and it will be very time consuming, right? So it will save your time. So this is how you can do the security
So
patching easily.
so I want to remind my viewers that, okay, OpenShift is not just an investment running hundreds of microservices, container based microservices, and making it to scale. What Situ initially talked about, how scheduler helps and all, but there are whole gamut of things which actually make the application production ready, and that is what I was telling, right? Okay, walk, run, then fly. So if you want millions of transaction to be taken care, and you want your application to be production ready, and it really solves the business problem. It might have started with the proof of concept, then all these things which really help the application modernization. So Situ, I also wanted to ask, um, I have interacted with the the CXOs, especially the decision maker, right? Who actually look at the investment and the return on investment. So timeline is one thing which always bothered them, right? Okay, means they have seen some of the vendors, they take months to take an application out of dev, even though it is being developed, and take many months out of production. So do you want to throw some light how timeline wise your team is working? Means what are this smallest window an application has gone into production, and what is the largest?
Yeah. So when we talk about timeline, it is a complex thing. We cannot just simply say that we can do this application in this particular time, because obviously there are many factors in order to productionize one application on OpenShift. There are many things that we need to consider. So first thing is obviously setting up a clean environment and segregating the code and configuration. So I have explained it that how your configuration should be separated, right? And then containerize the application, then pushing it to the OpenShift, integrating it with other integrations, suppose such as SSL and SSO, all these things, right? So usually the assessment, it obviously depends upon the application. I am not saying that it will not be different, it is a static per time period, but usually for one of the business critical applications, it takes 1 to 2 weeks of assessment, then a total of 7 weeks of re-architecting and re-engineering the application to onboard it to the OpenShift platform in the dev, right? Obviously after the dev, we need to onboard it to UAT and then production. So when you're running into production, there are lots of things involved, like the UAT testing happens, the production, the feedback from there will come. If it needs some more modifications, some more adjustments at the code level, then we have to do it, then again go through the dev UAT process. Then finally, if the UAT testing is successful, we have to onboard it to the production, right? So usually if you are talking about an application in UAT, so dev plus UAT, so a small application usually takes 7 to 8 weeks of time, and a fairly large application can take up to 12 to 14 weeks of timeline, right? So 11 weeks is the time we can onboard it to the dev and then UAT. So you can say that 12 to 14 weeks that we can look at when we're talking about your fairly huge application on OpenShift.
Got it. So, and this is not just one microservice, right? Okay, I have seen in your typical, complex scenarios where at least 15, microservices, five external system connections, several dependency on the ecosystem. So you are what the timeline what you're talking about is again based on the complexity, which
Of the
takes up to
application.
10 weeks, right? Okay, not the one, okay, which you just run it on an nginx and takes live.
Obviously not.
Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
obviously not, because in banking domains there are lots of things we need to consider before actually running it in UAT and then in production. So obviously there are external integrations, how the application behaves on OpenShift. So all these things we need to carefully see and assess.
Got it. uh, so tell something more about path to production, because on the agenda I did announce that okay, this particular session will let our viewers know this entire journey, right? Entire journey of dockerizing an app, making it stateless or semi stateless. I'm being careful since you said stateless versus stateful versus semi stateless is a debate which is going in application development team, and making sure that it is taking all the way to production and sustain. So do you want, means I know you have already talked about this, but um, do you want to talk about the production side of it, means after it takes off the UAT, what exactly happens?
Okay. So I have already explained that what needs to be done when you are containerizing one application. So you can start with your application binary. So if you're talking about a Java application, obviously there should be some jar file, some war file, or some other application binary which is already compiled. So you need to take that timestamp release of the application, and you need to run it through the through your RHAMT tool, and you need to see the code, generate the report, then set up the dev environment and start containerizing the application, right? So once the application is containerized and it is integrated with all the necessary third party, or I would not say third party, because sometimes we have to deal with that kind of integration, but the necessary integrations that are required for the applications to run. Suppose your application is connecting to the database and to the caching, to SSO. So those kind of integrations that we have to do. Then onboard the application to the CI/CD and to the OpenShift. So that happens, then your dev is sorry dev is complete, right? Then your developers need to do the functionality testing. So that is where all the testing part, the first level testing is coming in. So once your application is on OpenShift, first is functionality testing, right? After that is done, and that is completely finished, then we can onboard that to UAT, right? We can promote, actually we are not onboarding, we are promoting that to UAT. So in the UAT, obviously there will be people, or there will be testers who will be testing the applications from all the fronts, whether it is catering to the peak hour load, whether the application is breaking or not, whether it is logging everything in the OpenShift native logging module, or whether it is breaking somewhere. So all these things will be tested, right? So once those things are tested and it is passed, the UAT testing is passed, then it goes to production. So usually in big organizations, UAT and productions are identical. So there will be no difference. So the versions are same, the same set of application image, same set of configurations, everything will be same. So when you promote your application to your production, at that time your application can run in production, but you have to take care of the mapping of the application with the URL that is going to be served to the users, to the end user. So obviously you need to generate your application URL, you have to map it with the existing load balancers, or the DNS service if it is internal, or to any other external DNS providers, or load balance service providers. And you have to see how the application flow happens and how the ingress flow is coming in, right? And once that happens, then we have to see whether this application being used with other integrations, or with other kind of applications, and how the application is performing. So all these things will happen during the production, but the most important thing is mapping your application URL with the existing load balancer setup and the DNS setup that the organization is having. And most of the time it is very critical, because we have to cater to the requirement that the application should be in a HA state, and in a failover state. If one of the OpenShift cluster is down, then the application the URL should be automatically fail over to another cluster, right? So those things will be required, and all these things. So the entire process, it starts with the application assessment, because during the application assessment we will review the code, we will do the deep dive, we will see how the application is mapped with the load balancers at the same timestamp when we are doing the application assessment.
Thank you. So, so to repeat, this entire process, your assess, then containerize, then scale, then make it healthy, sustain, take it to production, and make sure that you don't compromise on any of the production quality. Uh, so next is what means the ROI, right? Okay, the return on investment, right? So The benefit quantification, I just wanted to let our viewers know that quantifying benefit data, for a CFO, for a CIO, for a CTO, is looked at in different lens. And what you see in my slide is the technology, real world benefit. Otherwise, I have seen organizations who has at least 3-year ROI calculation. ROI calculation with respect to the planning, design, development, how much they reduce from the initial application development, continuous application development, testing, the deployment cost, how much they used to spend, how much they used to spend on application lifecycle management, upgrade, maintenance, that also. And most critical is the infrastructure utilization, VM versus container, so the benefits are being quantified in a different way. But Situ, I wanted to understand more from the CTO side. How do you see the benefit has helped in your consulting experience?
Okay, so obviously, when we are talking about digital transformation, so the benefits are huge. So your application, the entire environment. So if you are responsible for one of the application, be it a business a critical application or a transactional application, if it is somehow self-healed and it is somehow scaled to a level where it is not impacting the underlying platform or the underlying hardware in a way that it will cause problems to other applications, because obviously there will be multiple applications deployed on the same cluster, then it creates huge real world benefits, right? The CTO at the CTO level, they can say that they can very proudly say that they are now adapting to the digital transformation. Their applications are running in a resilient self-healing platform, and they can better cater to it, right? So if you have a transactional application, then suppose your mobile banking application, right? Or your EPI application, such as phone pay or Google Pay or something like that. So if these applications can be smart enough to detect where the problem is and how the services are down, then and they can self-heal. They can actually go back to a previous deployment, and they can be always online, and they can be always served to the customer. Then it is a business benefit that we're talking about, and the CTOs will take pride in that kind of transformation, right? So that is how our OpenShift container platform is helping the business to transform themselves, right? And the real value, the real return on investment is whether their application is live for a certain period of time, and how the application is serving the users well, because that is the actual aim or goal of each CTO or business owner or application owner, right? So the application will never be down. So that is how this entire transformation is showing the ROI at the business side.
Got it. So to summarize, it is one is the speed you talked about. So 10 to 200 times faster, time to market. It depends, okay, how we calculate the, total cycle time and time reduction it does. At the same time, you also did touch upon the other technology aspect with respect to the return on investment, right? Fantastic. So I have, this is my last point to tell most of our viewers that, okay, what we have gained in our last many years of experience modernizing, monolithic, and helping customers to, doing microservice of their application and hosting it successfully on OCP before we open for the Q&A. And I already have a list of questions lined up from great questions coming up. So, Situ, would you like to give a closer, right? Uh, Before we jump into the skill development, I have kept some time for skill development because that is one of the main ask by most of my customers, and my interactions have been how to start and how easy to start, right? So before we go there, do you want to highlight any of your top 10 observations or pointers which you want to give it to your viewers?
Yeah, so we can say that the transformation of the legacy or monolithic application is not that easy, right? But uh, when it comes to the availability of application documentation, the availability of understanding, the availability of the application team or the developers to understand the application functionality better, to understand the underlying logic better, the application logic better. So it all depends upon that. The more we understand the application, there will be more ways we can find out how to containerize the application, how to transform it to fully stateless or to a semi stateless state, where and how to run it on OpenShift, right? So when we actually do some kind of monolithic application transformation, so we, whether there is documentation or not, we have to create the documentation from our understanding. So you can imagine that how much understanding is needed for that, how much deep dive sessions is needed for that. And obviously your applications, we are making them, we have to understand the underlying logic, right? That whether the application is dependent upon some kind of session or some kind of state, and how to remove that, and how to make it, make the application uh, native of the platform, or independent of the platform, and how we can use the same patterns or the reusable templates to deploy the application again and again on the OpenShift, different OpenShift environment. So you do it for one environment, then the same patterns, same templates can be reused on other environments or other OpenShift platforms, right?
Sure,
So
got you.
yeah.
Okay, so a quick, pool of questions. The question coming from Lavakumar Ranjala: how is OpenShift better than AKS and GKE? People, those who do not know, AKS is Microsoft Azure Kubernetes, and GKE is Google Cloud Kubernetes. Both are, specific to a public cloud, and OpenShift is available on any private and public cloud and on premise. So that's the basic way to differentiate that your application developed anywhere and deployed anywhere. There is no dependency with respect to a particular public cloud. But L- Lava Kumar, if you have specific questions, how the life cycle matters in AKS and GKE, how the cost matters, how the development pattern matters, then please do reach out to us. I have already shared the QR code during the session, and if you get to see it again, then please do reach out to us, and I can I'll be happy clarifying more questions, much in detail. The next question coming from Vishal Rana. He is asking, can you please suggest for one of my customer having query, they are a small B2C manufacturing company, and the apps will be based on data sources, and they are using data feed from Zapier, Integromat, webhooks, and other sources, passing data from multiple email IDs they do. And they primarily want to develop three apps: conversation management, production management, and individual user task management, using Microsoft Planner. So your question is how we can help you. Vishal, I would ask Kinil or Dilip, one of them, to get in touch don't worry, okay, what is your role in the company, but we will be interested to help you if we can help you in this particular context. Situ, unless you have a direct solution, I think we should park this for a specific detailed discussion. uh,
Yeah, it doesn't look like that I can
yeah.
provide a direct solution in one
Yeah, so that's
second,
why
right?
I wanted to steal it from your radar. Ramesh is asking, an industry is moving towards serverless function for processing and SaaS offering. How does this impact container-based applications? Situ, can you briefly or one line you can answer? Serverless versus SaaS offering versus container-based application.
Yeah, so obviously there is serverless and SaaS offerings, but when we talk about big organizations, so there you will find compliances that restricts you to onboard your application to a serverless platform or to serve it as a SaaS platform, right? So we are talking about transactional apps. So think about your mobile bank like ICICI or HDFC or SBI online banking applications. So those cannot be on a serverless platform. So you think about it, because there are integrations which are more complex than the serverless platform can handle, right? And obviously it cannot be considered as a SaaS product or SaaS application. So there are instances where you will not be able to use your applications or board your applications to a serverless platform. And serverless is actually beneficial for small applications or the applications which is intended for doing a specific or a targeted job, right? But when it comes to transform some existing application, monolithic or legacy application, to a application that is container, then we have to consider the transformation, digital transformation.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, means to a great extent. Um, So I have one more question coming from Maran. If it is a new application being developed ground up, what is the timeline? I think Situ did explain in pretty detailed way, Maran, what the timeline he was talking about, anywhere between 6 to 7 week and all the way up to 11, is for those complex, ground up developed application. Otherwise, it can be done within a week if it is something which is ready to be rehosted onto OpenShift. um, do you have to be wary of various versions of OpenShift, and is it backward integration? Situ, would you like to um, answer this,
No,
or
no. They are asking that do you have to be wary of various versions of OpenShift?
yeah?
Okay, so doesn't need to. So if your application is containerized and you are using OpenShift 3.7, so any OpenShift stable version, then you don't have to do many changes at the application code level, but you might have to do some changes at the integration level if your application is using some of the native services that OpenShift offers. So at that time, suppose in the earlier versions of OpenShift there was no operator concept. If your application is using some kind of operator integrations, so at that time you probably need to do a little bit change to your application code. Otherwise it is not needed. If we are talking about native containers, then you don't have to touch your application, be it a OpenShift older version or newer version, right? And obviously there is backward compatibility that it offers.
Thank you. So the last question, what are the minimum developer and service team size needed to deploy and manage OCP for mid-sized cooperative bank? I will take this question. Deployment, it takes somewhere few minutes to couple of hours. So don't think that OCP deployment takes days and month. It depends on the complexity and the design consulting which you have taken or understood. So skill is one thing which you must have before commit on a timeline. So my next slide is on the skill development. And the second thing is how many people required, as minimum as one. There are operators, and we have integrated with Slack and Google Home. So you tell tell the Google Home, and it, so how much you optimize and automate, that matters. Okay, how many people you want to deploy. Otherwise, okay, for a cooperative bank, okay, for a low cost investment, I would say that okay, you can upskill your existing staff or have few OCP engineers slash developers who can help you. And to deploy, it doesn't take much time. It is pretty simple and very quick. So I will have the moderator Gaurav. If you can help me with the OpenShift skill development from Red Hat, and I personally endorse OpenShift in all my customer meetings, and how the skill development work. Gaurav, would you like to help me with this?
Yeah, why not, Deepak? Thank you so much. First of all, I guess before we jump onto this part, I guess we need to give a break to Shiti. Shiti, definitely you need to take some water in, man. Means thank you so much for gracing us with a lot of pointers to talk about the OpenShift, the learning path, how to do the skill assessment, application, and many more. Okay, now jumping onto the OpenShift skill development, definitely Deepak sir talking about the question which you just answered, that as many as low possible. It has a variety of things to incalculate with. Now, one person, if he wants to get skilled up, definitely they require the knowledge of Linux, which they can get started with the Red Hat Certified System Administrator course. On top of which, why we are encouraging you, because one of the question that somebody asked, that how OpenShift is better than AKS or GKE and XYZ. Deepak rightly mentioned that it helps you to be the not restricted to a single environment, that just talking about Amazon or Azure. We work with all the cloud vendors and we help you because the underlying platform is the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or in case of latest offering from Red Hat OpenShift, it is RHEL Core OS. So talking about the containers, the next step, yes, we offers few of the free courses where you can have the glimpse that how the containers work, or I should say the technical overview for the containerized application. Then you can start learning with the container and the Kubernetes course, where we help you to deploy your containers, write your Docker files, and how you can proceed managing with the Kubernetes tool, because Red Hat OpenShift platform is also a certified Kubernetes platform itself. Right from when the Google launches the Kubernetes project, right from day two itself, or rather I should say the moment Kubernetes was made open source, Red Hat is the leading contributor to the Kubernetes project. So in DO 180, which is our starting offering, you can get started with learning of containers and Kubernetes. Then you can jump on to the OpenShift, where we help you to do the administration task by the course name DO 280. We also have the respective certification, and I guess the team Prodevans can definitely help you to get yourself leverage up with the help of containers knowledge and the Kubernetes, while also some next step talking about the containerized app development and many others as well. So that is basically the learning path, I would say. Then, if you also want to have some deep dive talking about the specialist in security, and so these are basically the getting started points: DO 180, DO 280, and even the RSCSA. That is the just starting point from the Red Hat. And if you just want to go ahead with the like application development or the security in containers, we do offer DO 288 and DO 425
Yeah, so
courses.
I would say that okay, I knew Situ as a system administrator, Gaurav as a system administrator, but they have been onto the application development solutioning. So how difficult this transition is? Is this is an easy transition for all my system administrator friends? Becoming a pure developer friendly administrators.
So if you ask me, definitely it is the one of the most easiest way, and I believe we always at Red Hat encourages the ease of adoption of technology, and that's why we presented this step by step process, that we are not asking you directly to do the application development. We have made you the course where you understand about containers first, manage your containers via Kubernetes, and then you start talking about the Red Hat OpenShift. However, we don't restrict you to jump directly on the next step, but you rightly started the presentation that rather than do the fly, start learning to crawl, walk, and then run. So that is how this path is done. For me, yes, the OpenShift learning is very much easy. Definitely, it is not just a matter of like few hours. It definitely takes a bit days to get expertise to understand the architecture. But once you are done, I believe you won't leave this field for sure. Okay.
Situ, microservice developer. So how do you see a OpenShift developer and microservice developer is different? Would you like to throw some light? Because I have divided, skill development into three type. One is your system operation. Then Gaurav also talked about supporting the application developers. The microservice developer means so all that what you were telling, is that coming from building the skill set how to develop a microservice, and how Red Hat training helps?
Yes, obviously. So microservice developers. So when we talk about a specific language such as Java, so if you are a Java developer, you must be knowing what is the microservice architecture of Java, right? So after that, so you can have your microservices ready in Java, but you need a deployment platform to deploy that, right? And there are lots of things that are coming in when we are talking about deployment platforms such as OpenShift. So there is services specific to OpenShift, and there are new native operator concept that is there in OpenShift. So you can use these things in your microservices, and you can stabilize your application. You can add more features to it, right? So you develop your application in a microservice manner, and you do it on OpenShift so that you can readily see or instantly see the impact of your code as a microservice container, right, on OpenShift. So that is how you should be looking at a microservice development on OpenShift. So the instant result or instant deployment on OpenShift and seeing your application live as a container.
And I guess just adding to one point which Shithi just mentioned, that we never forget that developers are the kingmakers. We need to make sure that developer is freely working without worrying the source code or the worry of their losing their code which they have written. And OpenShift gives us that freedom by including the properties like operators, which Shithi has already talked about. So definitely that is there. Yeah.
Excellent. So we are top of the hour. Over to you, Gaurav. Sorry if we would have taken longer than expected, and we could not hold the whole audience for a great 120 minute. um, I have two questions which is unanswered. One is for the Podman versus Docker. I think that should be an opportunity to Prodevans next time by Red Hat to host a session which is Podman fundamental and OpenShift. And another is the container storage, NFS versus OCS, object storage.
OCS.
So I would request Gaurav and Kinil to host us again,
Sure.
so that we can do justice and bring our expertise, what we have been doing with respect to the Podman architecture and OCS. Thank you, Red Hat, and I'm glad that my team could able to get some of their learning experience shared here, but I'm open to do that again and again, and we are open to be in as many sessions of Red Hat in future. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, our pleasure hosting the entire Prodevans team, and thank you so much for guiding us through that. Be your application ready for hosting on the containers and guiding through the various aspects of how Red Hat OpenShift can bring value. So let me jump on to our next fun session talking about the quiz. So Tanu, can you help me in launching the quiz for our viewers, please? So, guys, there will be some of the polling question, and here is the first polling question, which is live up. So, please feel free to answer it. The first question says, "What is the benefit of using Docker containers?" The options are standardization and productivity, CI efficiency and rapid deployment, compatibility and maintainability, or all of the above. So please feel free to answer that up. You will have few seconds left. The results will be sent via email after this session, and also the recordings. You can find it in the thank you emailers from the agency itself. Hurry up, guys. Time is wrapping up for the first question. Okay, the first question is up. The second question would be up in any moment. Okay, the second question is quite simple and easy to go. We have also talked about, is Docker image is OS dependent? You have to just answer yes or no. It is the fastest finger first question, guys. Please feel free to answer that up very quickly. Okay. Again, if I have to repeat, is Docker image OS dependent? Yes or no? Just choose one and you might be in a phase to get some Red Hat goodies. Okay. Time's getting up for this. Let's see what the next question says for you. Okay, here's another question which says, what are the features OpenShift as an orchestrator offers? Autoscaling, self-healing, centralized logging and monitoring, or all of the above? Yes, though it is the fastest finger first, but please feel free to read the question options and answer it up. And definitely, this is something that we have already discussed in this session. What are the features OpenShift offers? Auto-scaling, self-healing, centralized logging and monitoring, all of the above. Time running up, guys. Okay. I hope that time's up for this. And we have another question also, I guess. Just one last more questions. Okay, Tanu, I guess we have one more question, right? So we can we have the next question, please? Tanu, next question. Okay. Great. So final question, guys, coming out. Should application be migrated to OpenShift without doing an app assessment? I guess we have the whole bunch of the section that we talked about this thing. Is it yes or no? Again, repeating, should application be migrated to OpenShift without doing an app assessment? Answer to that, yes or no. And you might be in a race to win some Red Hat goodies. You will receive the email results quiz results over an email, and you can also find the session recording into the thank you emailer sending out from the agency. And that's a time wrap for the quiz. Okay, so thank you so much everyone for participating in the quiz. Once again, thank you so much to the entire Prodevans team for helping us in discovering the container adoption journey. I guess Deepak has done this discovery session QR code once again. So guys, if you want to get in touch with them to discover, to brief you more about the container adoption journey, feel free to scan this up and feel free to reach out to us. The feedback form, I guess, will be also pasted right now in the chat section. Please do provide your feedback regarding the sessions. And moreover, we'll see you in the next time. Thank you so much, everyone. Over to you, Tanu. Anything that you would love to add?
Once again, thank you all for joining us today. We wish you all a great day ahead. Stay safe and take care of yourself. As said, winner will be announced via email and goodies will be sent over to your home address. And wish you all good luck. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Have a
Stay
great day.
safe.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.